Hey guys, welcome back. Here we are with the BMW 550i, the N62 series motor, V8, twin overhead turbos. Just back to the motor again. It's been about an hour. I've been sitting here just kind of disassembling things. Now you can see that I have the hoses out completely. I found that you have to remove the hoses from the coolers to the turbos entirely. You have all these wires here that are running down to the coils. They go to these little plastic packs here that are secured down with two bolts. Take those two bolts out and it gives you a little more room to move those around. But I also, I'm just updating it again here because I wanted to let you know that upon getting into this, I also found that there are 4 bolts that are mounted to the top. I believe these are holding your alternator in place. There's one here, and there's another one right there behind it. You can kind of see we got 4 of them, 2 on each side. This one here is a little harder to get to. This is where I just stopped to update the video, but you can see once you take those 4 bolts out, then this whole housing here above the alternator starts to move. Reason for doing this is because you have a fuel line here coming off your high pressure system, and if you follow that, it comes across here, it loops down right here, it comes back up and goes back over to your other pressure control valve. These are your fuel. This is one of your fuel rails that connects your 2 pressure lines together. There are 2 of these little clips here that are they're bolted in. You can see there's these little tabs here that are bolted down, just a nut holding those on. There's 2, one on each side. Once you take that out, that pretty much frees up this line here, basically, with the exception that you may have a few other bolts here. Like you can see, there's 2 bolts here that are also connected to this line as well. So on this side of the driver's side for this line, it's going to be a little more trickier because we have to disconnect the fitting here. We're going to leave this little guy here connected. What we're going to do is once we get it out of there, we're just going to kind of flip it over here to the side and keep it out of the way. That way we don't have to mess with this little sensor because all the wires will be pulled forward a little bit to clear the valve cover. But then after we do that, you know, we got to disconnect this. Then this whole line here will be entirely free from the motor, and that'll be your first fuel line off the car. Unless you decide to try to disconnect it somewhere else. But this is basically what you need to do and how you have to do it in order to get these valve covers out. And this is why it takes so long to do, because some of these bolts are a little tricky to get into, and it's just like this here. You know, you have to disconnect all your little sensors to your turbo and all that. You got to pull these lines through. That's just to get this gas line up out of there because it's so tight up inside. You have to free up this wiring housing or you're not going to be able to get the clearance to get that line out. On top of that, you have to have these 4 bolts free to pull these lines more out of your way. I wouldn't necessarily say you have to take it out, but you definitely have to loosen up the bolts to give yourself some wiggle room in there. If you leave it bolted down, you're not going to have no room to do anything in here at all. And this is the problem with this vehicle, is there's so many tight spaces, just not enough room to work. So what I'm going to go do, now that I got the fuel line disconnected, the hoses are out of here, we got a little play in this box here. You can see I'm moving the whole, you can see that I can move this whole power steering pump basically. It's connected to the same bracket that we just loosened up. There you go, you can see it moving now. You got the housing moving up there. That's just to give yourself a little more room to work with this line. Then again, like I said, you have to disconnect all your sensors that are going to your turbos because it crosses over top of the fuel line. You know, we have quite a few different lines here. Actually, you can see here, this one, we can just kind of pull it up out of the way. This is what you're going to find that you're going to have to do with most of your lines. Then once we go down through here, we disconnect these bolts off of these wiring harnesses that are along here. You can see here's one right here. Then we got another one way in the back. There's quite a few that you have to take out and remove. What else here? You do not have to remove your coolers. Your coolers can stay in from the looks of things. We have enough room here to get down into the bolts. You do need to remove your oil neck. That gives you a little more working room. You can see a little better of what's going on down around you. But now I'm going to go ahead and start disconnecting my fuel lines. And I'm going to also start pulling out all my coils and spark plugs. Well, I'm going to leave the spark plugs in this case because we're not turning the motor over. We're not doing any kind of timing or nothing like that. So nothing dealing with compression. So I'm going to leave all the spark plugs in, but we do have to pull out all 4 coils on both sides just to get those harnesses out of the way. And hoping that once we do that, with these little black boxes here, they come apart and you can separate the plastic from the wiring, and I'm hoping that we have enough room once we do that to unclip this to pull all this wiring out of our way to free up some more room on this valve cover side. Now, I also want to note here that, as you can see, there's these 2 bolts here that are holding your exhaust in. These you do not have to touch. It looks like they are kind of, if you look at it real quick, it looks like they are part of your head or your valve cover, but in this case they are not. We need to remove these brackets here to get to these bottom bolts. And like I said before, the same thing that we do on the driver's side, we're going to have to do on the passenger side as well. And then from that, see you guys in the next hour, 2 hours again.